There is a planet, somewhere in the dark and the cold of space, that spins slowly on its axis. It has been spinning for a very long time, long before anything with eyes existed to watch it turn, long before anything with lungs existed to breathe the air above it, long before the first quiet evening settled over the first hill. This planet was already at work, already patient, already doing the quiet, unhurried business of being itself. That planet, of course, is this one, the one you are lying on right now, or sitting on, or curled up within the gentle pull of. Earth, home, the third rock from the sun, wrapped in a thin veil of atmosphere, tilted just slightly on its axis, as if leaning into a slow cosmic waltz it has been dancing for 4.5 billion years. Tonight, we are not going to rush through anything. There is nothing to rush toward. The planet beneath you has no schedule. It does not hurry. It has never hurried. The mountains were not built in an afternoon. The oceans were not filled in a week. The forests did not grow in a season. Everything that is magnificent about this world happened slowly, quietly, one molecule and 1 century at a time.
So let that be our invitation tonight. An invitation to slow down, to breathe a little more deeply, to let the body grow heavy, the thoughts grow loose, the breath grow long. And as you settle into stillness, let the world beneath you speak. Not in headlines, not in noise, not in the constant hum of human urgency, but in the language it has always used, the language of deep time, of patient stone, of water finding its way downhill, of seeds in the dark, pressing toward light they cannot yet see. There is so much about this earth that is simply, profoundly, quietly wonderful, and tonight all of it belongs to you. Before we continue, a small moment for our channel. If these slow, calm stories help you rest, please consider leaving a like, and if you haven't already, subscribing to Heyo Boring History for Sleep. Our goal right now is to reach 1,000 subscribers, and every single one matters more than you might think. If you're feeling generous, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there. If you have any leftover sleepy hype, send it our way. It means the world. Now, back to the planet. We will move through this world tonight the way a river moves through a valley, not in a straight line, not in a hurry, with gentle turns and quiet eddies and long still stretches where nothing seems to be happening, but everything is.
We will visit the deep ocean, where the water is dark and cold and full of light that living things have made themselves. We will stand at the foot of trees so old they were already ancient when the first human empires were just beginning. We will watch the sky dance with color at the poles, where particles from the sun collide with the atmosphere and produce something so beautiful it has no practical purpose whatsoever. We will listen, if only in imagination, to the low hum of a planet that is always, always making sound. This is not a story about disasters. This is not a story about crises or catastrophes or the ways the earth is fragile. Tonight, we are only here for the wonder, the steadiness, the ancient, unhurried generosity of a world that has been keeping living things alive for nearly 4 billion years and shows no signs of stopping. Find a comfortable position now. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Feel the weight of your body pressing down into whatever is holding you. And remember that beneath the mattress, beneath the floor, beneath the foundation, there is bedrock, old stone. And beneath that, more stone still. And below that, the slow churning heat of the earth's mantle. And at the very center, a solid inner core, made mostly of iron and nickel, as hot as the surface of the sun, pressing outward against the weight of everything above it. You are resting on top of something extraordinary. You have always been resting on top of something extraordinary. You just rarely have time to think about it. Tonight, you have all the time in the world.
Let us begin with a number. Not a large number by cosmic standards, but a number so vast that the human mind was never really designed to hold it comfortably. The Earth is approximately 4,540,000,000 years old. Say it slowly. 4,540,000,000 years. Now consider that the oldest known human civilization, the kind with writing and cities and recorded history, is roughly 5,000 to 6,000 years old. That means that if you compressed the entire history of Earth into a single calendar year, all of recorded human history would take place in the last 14 seconds of December 31st. Everything we know about ourselves, every pharaoh and emperor and philosopher, every war and plague and harvest festival, every cathedral and library and ship that ever crossed an ocean, every poem ever written and every fire ever lit, all of it compressed into 14 seconds out of a year. The rest of that year, the other 364 days and 23 hours and 59 minutes and 46 seconds, belongs to the Earth alone. And what a year it had before we arrived. The planet formed from a swirling disk of gas and dust that surrounded the young sun roughly 4.5 billion years ago. In the very early stages, it was not recognizable as anything like what it is now. It was molten, bombarded by asteroids and smaller bodies, still in the process of gathering its mass. The surface was a sea of magma, glowing red and orange, covered by a sky thick with volcanic gases and steam. There were no oceans yet, no continents, no atmosphere fit for breathing, just heat and pressure and the slow, patient accumulation of rock. Sometime around 4 billion years ago, the Earth began to cool. Water vapor condensed. The rains came, not as a gentle afternoon shower, but as a deluge lasting millions of years, slowly filling the basins of the young ocean floor. The first oceans formed in darkness, probably, under a sky still thick with volcanic clouds, and a sun that looked different then, a little younger, a little dimmer. There was no life yet,
but the conditions for it were beginning to arrange themselves with a kind of quiet inevitability, the way water finds the lowest ground without being told to. Around 3.5 billion years ago, perhaps a little earlier, something appeared that would eventually become everything alive on this planet. The first life was not dramatic. It was not a fish, not a plant, not anything you could hold in your hand. It was a single-celled organism, something like a bacterium, living in the warm, shallow waters of the early ocean, or perhaps near a hydrothermal vent on the seafloor. It had no nucleus, it had no eyes, it could not move with any particular intention, but it was alive. It could take in energy and use it. It could make copies of itself. That first spark of life persisted and changed and branched, and over billions of years filled every corner of the planet it could find. For most of Earth's history, life was entirely invisible. 2 billion years of single cells, quietly dividing. Then, around 540 million years ago, something extraordinary happened. Complex life, with bodies, with limbs, with eyes and shells and fins, exploded into existence in what geologists call the Cambrian explosion. In geological terms, it happened fast. In human terms, it lasted tens of millions of years.
After that, the story speeds up, though only relatively speaking. Fish, plants colonizing land, insects filling the air, reptiles, dinosaurs, the great extinction 66 million years ago when an asteroid struck what is now the Gulf of Mexico and ended 3/4 of all species on Earth, including every non-avian dinosaur that had walked the land for 160 million years. And then the long, slow recovery. Mammals filling the spaces the dinosaurs had left, grassland spreading, ice ages advancing and retreating, and eventually, in a thin sliver of recent time, primates descending from trees, standing upright, walking across savannas in Africa, lighting fires, painting on cave walls, building boats and cities and roads. All of it on this one patient turning planet, all of it on this one piece of rock that has been going about its quiet business for 4.5 billion years, and will likely continue to do so for several billion more. There is something deeply settling about that, something that puts the ordinary anxieties of a single human evening into a kind of gentle perspective. You are not a small thing on a large planet. You are a remarkable development of an astonishing process that took billions of years to produce you, specifically, in this form, in this moment, lying here on this quiet night, breathing this air that exists nowhere else in the known universe. That is, by any measure, extraordinary. And all you have to do right now is rest. The planet has been patient for 4 billion years. It will be patient tonight too.
More than 70% of the surface of the Earth is covered in water. If you were a visitor from space approaching this planet for the first time, you would think you were approaching an ocean world, a blue world, a world of vast rolling surfaces glinting in sunlight, of clouds forming over water, of storms born from the warmth of tropical seas. And you would be right. In many ways, Earth is mostly ocean, most of it still unexplored. More of the ocean floor has been mapped in high detail by spacecraft looking at it from above than has been explored directly by people going down to look. The ocean is deep in ways that challenge imagination. The Mariana Trench in the western Pacific Ocean is the deepest known point on Earth. At its lowest, a place called the Challenger Deep, the seafloor sits roughly 11 kilometers below the surface. 11 kilometers. If you could somehow drop Mount Everest into the Mariana Trench, the summit would still be more than a kilometer underwater. At those depths, the pressure is almost 1,000 times greater than at the surface. The water temperature is just a few degrees above freezing. No sunlight has ever reached that far. Not a single photon from the sun has illuminated the walls of that trench since the trench formed. And yet there is life there.
Creatures adapted to darkness and pressure and cold live in those depths with a kind of quiet practicality that is both alien and humbling. Amphipods, small shrimp-like creatures, have been found at the very bottom of the Challenger Deep. Sea cucumbers drift along the seafloor like slow, boneless dreams. Microbes have been found living in the sediment kilometers below the seafloor, existing in a state so slow it barely qualifies as living by any human standard, some of them taking thousands of years to reproduce once. But it is not the pressure or the cold or the depth that makes the deep ocean most dreamlike tonight. It is the light. In the darkness of the deep sea, roughly 75% of all living organisms can produce their own light. This phenomenon is called bioluminescence, and it is so common below a few hundred meters that the deep ocean is arguably the most consistently lit environment on Earth, just lit from within rather than from above. The light comes in flashes and pulses and slow glows. A lanternfish carries rows of photophores along its belly like small porthole windows, producing a faint blue-green glow that mimics the dim light filtering down from above, making it nearly invisible to predators looking up. A deep-sea jellyfish pulses with soft rings of light when disturbed, like a living lamp being slowly switched on and off. Anglerfish dangle bioluminescent lures on stalks above their heads, fishing in the absolute dark with a single, slow, beckoning glow.
There are squids that flash brilliant blue-white patterns across their skin in fractions of a second, communicating in a language made entirely of light. There are shrimp that squirt clouds of bioluminescent material, glowing ink, to confuse predators. There are worms called tomopteris that drift through the water column like translucent ribbons, producing yellow bioluminescence, which is exceptionally rare in the ocean, where most living light is blue or green. And then there are the creatures that simply drift, the ones without particular agenda. Comb jellies are among the most beautiful things in the world's oceans, transparent, gelatinous, about the size of a walnut or smaller, trailing delicate tentacles as they move. They produce no light of their own, but the tiny hair-like cilia they use to swim refract the light around them into shimmering rainbows of iridescence. In videos captured by research submersibles descending through the water column, comb jellies looked like drifting pieces of stained glass cathedral windows, moving through a black cathedral that has no walls and no ceiling and no floor. Far up the ocean water column, in the shallow coastal waters of tropical bays, there is another kind of living light. Dinoflagellates, tiny single-celled organisms, can gather in such numbers in warm, nutrient-rich bays that the water itself begins to glow when disturbed. Boats passing through these bays leave glowing wakes. Swimmers leave glowing trails of their own motion. Fish dart through your water as streaks of cold blue fire. Some bays around the world are famous for this. The Mosquito Bay in Puerto Rico is considered one of the brightest bioluminescent bays on Earth, where the water can glow so intensely that you can read by the light of your own hand disturbing the water from the surface of a kayak on a moonless night. There is something about that image that stays with you. The planet in the dark, making its own light. Not for human eyes, not because anything decided it should be beautiful, just because life found a way to use light as a tool, and in doing so, created one of the most quietly breathtaking phenomena on Earth. The ocean is also full of sound, but not the kind we usually imagine. Humpback whales, the great baritone poets of the sea, produce songs that can last for hours and travel hundreds of miles through the water. Male humpbacks sing complex evolving sequences of moans and groans and high, thin whistles, and within a given population, all the males tend to sing the same song. But the song changes over time, with new phrases gradually replacing old ones, spreading across the population like a slow oceanic fashion trend. A whale in the Pacific and a whale in the Atlantic may sing completely different songs, but within the same ocean, the whales update their repertoire together.
Deep in the ocean, there is a zone called the SOFAR channel, an acronym for sound fixing and ranging, where the temperature, pressure, and salinity of the water conspire to make sound travel with extraordinary efficiency. Humpbacks are thought to dive down to this channel specifically to use it, sending their low-frequency songs across entire ocean basins. A whale singing off the coast of Alaska may be heard in some frequencies near the coasts of Japan. The ocean is not silent. It has never been silent. It is full of clicks and groans and whistles and the long, slow, ancient songs of creatures that have been singing in the dark for longer than our species has existed. And all of that is happening right now, somewhere beneath the surface of a sea you may never visit, in darkness no human has ever illuminated. All of it, tonight, while you rest. Let us come up from the ocean now, slowly, through the dark water and the lit water and the green-lit shallows, and up through the surface of the sea into the warm air. And let us walk inland until we find a forest, a real forest, not a park or a managed plantation, but a genuine, old, deep forest, where the canopy has been closed for decades or centuries, and the floor is thick with centuries of fallen leaves, and the undergrowth is a tangle of ferns and mosses and fungi, and fallen logs in various stages of becoming soil again. Stand at the edge of it for a moment. Feel the temperature drop. Feel the light change from the open brightness of the meadow or the road behind you to the soft, filtered, green-gold light that falls through the leaves above. Listen to the way sound changes. The bird song is different here. The wind sounds different moving through leaves than it does in open air. And there is an underlying quietness, even when birds are singing and insects are humming, that the open world does not quite have. Scientists have a word for the experience of being in a forest. The Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, has been studied extensively in recent decades, and the findings are consistently, almost boringly positive. Time spent among trees lowers cortisol levels. It reduces blood pressure.
It measurably improves mood and reduces anxiety. People who spend time in forests sleep better afterward. Their immune function improves. Participants in forest bathing studies show increases in the activity of natural killer cells, a type of white blood cell, for days after their forest visit.
Beneath a healthy forest floor, the roots of trees are entwined with the thread-like filaments of fungi in a relationship so intimate and so old that it is difficult to know where one organism ends and the other begins. These fungal networks, often called mycorrhizal networks, extend through the soil for immense distances, connecting not just one tree to one fungus, but trees to trees through their shared fungal partners. This network, which researchers have taken to calling the Wood Wide Web, allows trees to pass nutrients and chemical signals to each other. A large, mature tree can share carbon with a smaller, younger tree growing in its shade, essentially subsidizing the smaller tree's survival in low light conditions. When a tree is under attack by insects, it releases chemical signals through the network that travel to neighboring trees, which begin producing defensive compounds before the insects have even arrived. In a forest that has not been heavily disturbed, this network is ancient and complex. Research in Chilean forests has found that the oldest, largest trees, some of them thousands of years old, are connected to hundreds of unique fungal species, many of which may be new to science. The oldest individual studied, a tree known as Alerce abuelo, at least 2,400 years old, hosted more than 300 species of fungi that were unique to that tree alone. A single teaspoon of healthy forest soil contains more individual organisms than there are human beings on Earth. The soil is not dirt. It is a living community of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, mites, springtails, earthworms, and creatures too small to see with the naked eye, all of them cycling nutrients, breaking down dead material, building the chemical conditions that allow plants to grow. The forest does not merely sit on top of this world. It is woven through it. It extends downward into the soil and upward into the sky in one continuous breathing structure. And it is breathing, literally. Trees breathe through their leaves in a process so fundamental to life on Earth that it shapes the very composition of the atmosphere. Every green leaf is a tiny chemical factory, taking in carbon dioxide from the air and water drawn up from the roots, using the energy of sunlight to combine them into sugar, and releasing oxygen as a byproduct. This process, photosynthesis, is responsible for essentially all of the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere. Every breath you take, every molecule of oxygen that enters your lungs and travels to your blood and sustains your consciousness through this quiet night, was once released by something green, living and photosynthesizing. The forests of the Amazon, the largest tropical rainforest on Earth, covering roughly 5.5 million square kilometers, produce so much moisture through their collective transpiration that they create their own weather systems. Water evaporates from the billions of leaves in the canopy, rises into the atmosphere, condenses into clouds, and falls again as rain, which is absorbed by the roots and transpired again in a cycle that effectively makes the Amazon rainforest rain on itself, maintaining its own moisture in an act of collective self-sustenance so large it is visible from space. Trees, in their unhurried way, also grow.
A bristlecone pine in the harsh, high mountains of California, Nevada, and Utah grows almost imperceptibly slowly. In the harsh conditions it favors, high elevation, poor soil, extreme cold, fierce winds, a bristlecone pine might add less than a single centimeter of growth in a year. Its wood becomes extraordinarily dense and resinous, resistant to rot and insects. It can survive conditions that would kill almost anything else. The oldest individual tree ever documented, a bristlecone pine given the name Methuselah after the biblical patriarch said to have lived 969 years, is located somewhere in the White Mountains of California. Its exact location kept secret to protect it from vandalism, and is estimated to be over 4,800 years old. It was already ancient when the Egyptian pyramids were being built. It was already old when Homer composed the Iliad. It has stood in those cold, wind-swept mountains through the entire arc of recorded human history, through every empire and every revolution and every invention, and it is still standing now, still growing, still making its infinitesimal annual addition to its dense resinous wood. There is something profoundly settling about that, about the existence of something that has lived long enough to call 5,000 years a reasonable lifespan. We worry about so much, about the year, about the week, about the day, about the hour. And here is a tree that has been quietly growing through 48 centuries, asking nothing, requiring nothing of any human, simply persisting in the cold mountain air.
It does not know you exist, but it has been alive in those mountains all your life, and the lives of everyone who raised you, and their parents' lives, and their grandparents' lives, and every generation before them, as far back as the oldest family memory reaches, and beyond. That tree was already there. Breathe that in, slowly, and let yourself rest. Section 5. The atmosphere, the invisible blanket that holds us. Somewhere about 100 kilometers above where you are lying right now, the atmosphere thins out so dramatically that it is practically indistinguishable from space. That boundary, roughly defined by a line called the Kármán line, is the edge of the air, the point beyond which there is no weather, no wind, no oxygen, no sound. 100 kilometers. If you could drive straight up in a car at highway speed, you would reach the edge of the atmosphere in a little over an hour. The atmosphere is, by the scale of the planet, a gossamer thin coating. Imagine an apple. The apple's skin is roughly 2% of the apple's total diameter. Earth's atmosphere, proportionately, is about the same. If the Earth were shrunk to the size of an apple, the atmosphere would be roughly the thickness of the apple's skin. And yet that thin, fragile coating does everything.
It gives us air to breathe. It regulates temperature, keeping the surface warm enough for liquid water and cool enough for ice, maintaining the delicate range in which life can function. It filters ultraviolet radiation from the sun, blocking the high-energy wavelengths that would otherwise strip DNA apart and render the surface of the planet sterile. It burns up the vast majority of the meteors and space rocks that enter it, destroying thousands of objects every day in flashes of light that we call shooting stars. The atmosphere is divided into layers, each with its own character. The troposphere, the layer you live in, extends from the surface to about 12 kilometers up. It contains about 75% of the total mass of the atmosphere and virtually all of the weather. Clouds form here, rain falls here, thunderstorms build and collapse here. The winds that carry seeds and pollen and weather patterns across continents originate here. The air is dense enough to breathe at the surface, thinning as altitude increases. Above the troposphere lies the stratosphere, a quieter layer where the air is thin and the temperature actually increases with altitude, the reverse of the troposphere. This is where commercial aircraft typically cruise, above the turbulent weather below, in a zone of relative calm. And this is where the ozone layer resides, a diffuse concentration of ozone molecules stretched across the stratosphere like a screen door across the sky, absorbing the ultraviolet radiation that would otherwise reach the surface. The ozone layer is not a solid thing. It is not a membrane or a wall. It is simply a region of the atmosphere where ozone, a molecule made of 3 oxygen atoms rather than the usual 2, happens to be more concentrated. The total amount of ozone in the stratosphere, if it were all gathered together at the pressure of the Earth's surface, would form a layer only about 3 millimeters thick. 3 millimeters, barely the thickness of a stack of 2 or 3 pennies. That 3 millimeter equivalent layer is what stands between most living things on Earth's surface and the damaging ultraviolet radiation that would otherwise reach them. It has been doing this for hundreds of millions of years. Above the stratosphere, the atmosphere grows thinner still and stranger. The mesosphere, from about 50 to 85 kilometers up, is where most meteors burn. It is also the coldest part of the atmosphere, reaching temperatures as low as -90 degrees Celsius near its top. Strange clouds form here occasionally, called noctilucent clouds, night-shining clouds, thin wisps of ice crystals at extreme altitude that catch the light of the sun well after sunset, glowing electric blue against the darkening sky. They are among the highest clouds in the atmosphere and among the least understood. The thermosphere, from about 85 to 700 kilometers up, is where the atmosphere merges gradually into near space. The International Space Station orbits within the thermosphere. The air here is so thin that individual molecules travel long distances without colliding with each other. And this is the zone where the aurora, the northern and southern lights, occur. We will spend more time with the aurora later, but for now, consider just the fact of the atmosphere itself. This thin, invisible coating, this 2% of an apple skin layer of mixed gases that has been performing its invisible daily services for billions of years, providing air, filtering radiation, burning falling rocks before they reach the surface, hosting weather, carrying moisture inland from the oceans, and doing all of this without any maintenance, without any input from any human, without any acknowledgement or gratitude. The air you are breathing right now is roughly 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and about 1% of everything else: argon, carbon dioxide, water vapor, and trace amounts of other gases. The oxygen was produced by photosynthesis over billions of years. The nitrogen has been cycling through the atmosphere and the soil and living things, and back into the atmosphere in an endless loop for billions of years as well. The air in your lungs has been in countless other lungs before yours. It has been exhaled by trees and breathed in by elephants and blown across oceans in storm systems and frozen into glacier ice and melted back out and exhaled again. There is no fresh air in any absolute sense. There is only the same air, endlessly recycled through the great breathing system of the planet. Every breath you take tonight is a gift from 4 billion years of photosynthesis. Let it settle into you gently. Let it carry you towards sleep. There is a grove of trees in the White Mountains of California where some of the oldest living things on Earth grow in quiet, wind-swept patience. We have already met Methuselah, the bristlecone pine that has endured for nearly 5,000 years. But the bristlecone pines are not the only ancient ones. In a fjord in Sweden, there is a Norway spruce whose root system is estimated to be more than 9,700 years old. The visible part of the tree, the trunk and branches above ground, is only a few hundred years old, having grown and died and regrown from the same ancient root system multiple times over millennia. The tree above ground is young. The roots beneath it are older than the pyramids, older than the invention of writing, older than the wheel. It was called Old Chico by the researcher who confirmed its age, named after his dog. It stands in a mountain landscape in central Sweden, a modest-looking spruce by any outward measure, no taller than a small house. Nothing about it would suggest at a glance that its roots remember a time before agriculture existed in Europe. On the Fish Lake National Forest in Utah, there grows a grove of quaking aspens that appears from the surface to be simply a large grove of trees, thousands of white-trunked, shivering-leaved aspens spreading across about 43 hectares of mountainside. But they are not separate trees. They are a single organism. All those trunks and branches and shivering leaves are connected underground to one enormous root system, and all of them share identical genetic material. This organism, named Pando, from the Latin word meaning "I spread," is estimated to weigh approximately 6 million kilograms, making it one of the heaviest known organisms on Earth. Its root system is thought to be perhaps 80,000 years old. 80,000 years. When Pando's roots first spread through that Utah soil, modern humans were just beginning to migrate out of Africa. Neanderthals still walked the European continent. No human being had yet set foot in the Americas or Australia or the Pacific Islands. Pando was there. The forest is full of this kind of ancient persistence. Deep in the Chilean coastal range, a species of tree called the alurse, related to redwoods and equally impressive in its own way, grows with the same slow determination of the bristlecone pine. Alurse trees can live for more than 3,600 years. They grow in the cool, wet, temperate rainforests of southern Chile, and some of them are so enormous that several people holding hands cannot encircle a single trunk. The study we mentioned earlier, looking at the fungal network around one of these trees, found a 2,400-year-old alurse called Alurse abuelo, grandfather larch, that was connected underground to more than 300 species of fungi unique to that single tree, not to the forest as a whole, to that individual tree.
300 unique fungal species, each one with its own relationship to this one ancient organism, built over 24 centuries of shared underground life. It is, when you think about it, a kind of friendship, one that takes centuries to develop, that is invisible, that serves both parties in ways neither fully controls, and that continues quietly whether or not anyone is watching. There are also ancient corals. The coral reefs of the world, themselves extraordinary structures we will return to, include individual coral colonies of remarkable age. A black coral found off the coast of Hawaii has been estimated to be more than 4,260 years old, making it one of the oldest known animals on Earth. Black corals are deep-sea creatures, growing slowly in the cold, dark water below the reach of sunlight, and they are so slow-growing that they can add as little as 9 micrometers, less than 1/10 of a millimeter, to their length each year. 9 micrometers a year for 4,000 years. That is a pace so patient it makes even the bristlecone pine seem hurried. And then there are the microbes. In the deep sea floor sediment, researchers have found bacteria that appear to have been alive for millions of years. Their metabolism is almost incomprehensibly slow. Some microorganisms in deep sediment may take 10,000 years to repair a single molecule of damaged DNA. They are alive in the same sense that a sleeping person is alive, but the sleep lasts geological ages. What these ancient organisms have in common, the trees, the fungi, the corals, the slow, deep microbes, is not any particular strategy or any particular intelligence. They persisted because they were well suited to their place, and their place did not change catastrophically, and nothing came along to remove them. They simply continued one slow year after another, one patient ring of growth at a time. There is a lesson in that, perhaps, not about strategy or determination, just about the simple, persistent fact of continuing, of being quietly in the place where you are, doing what you do, one slow season at a time. Close your eyes a little more. The old trees are still there, in their mountains and their fjords and their temperate rainforests, growing their millimeter of new wood for this year, in the cold and the quiet. Section 7. The Aurora, when the sun paints the sky. Every 11 years or so, the sun enters a period of heightened activity. Its surface, already a roiling inferno of plasma and magnetism, becomes more turbulent. Sunspots multiply, solar flares erupt, and most relevantly for our purposes tonight, the sun releases enormous clouds of charged particles, billions of tons of electrons and protons and heavier ions, in events called coronal mass ejections. These clouds travel outward through space at speeds of between 1 and 3,000 kilometers per second. Some of them are aimed in other directions entirely, sweeping harmlessly past the orbits of planets. Some are aimed directly at Earth. When a coronal mass ejection reaches Earth, it encounters the planet's magnetic field first. Earth's magnetic field, generated by the churning, convecting liquid iron of the outer core, thousands of kilometers beneath the surface, extends far into space, a protective bubble called the magnetosphere that deflects the charged particles of the solar wind around the planet, the way a stone in a stream splits the current. For most of the history of complex life on Earth, the magnetosphere has been doing this essential work, shielding the surface from radiation that would otherwise strip away the ozone layer and make the surface far less hospitable.
But at the poles, where the magnetic field lines converge and dip down toward the surface, like the curved ends of a horseshoe magnet, the shield is thinner. Charged particles from the sun can follow these field lines down into the upper atmosphere, where they collide with oxygen and nitrogen atoms at altitudes of roughly 100 to 300 kilometers. And when those collisions happen, the atoms release energy as light. The result is the aurora. The northern lights, aurora borealis, visible in the sky above the Arctic regions, and the southern lights, aurora australis, their mirror image in the skies above Antarctica.
The colors of the aurora are determined by which atoms are being excited and at what altitude. Oxygen atoms at high altitudes, above 240 kilometers, produce a rare glowing red aurora, a deep crimson or blood red curtain across the upper sky. Oxygen at lower altitudes produces the most common color, the brilliant yellow-green that most people picture when they think of the northern lights. Nitrogen produces blue and purple hues, often visible at the lower edges of the aurora, where the excitement reaches the densest part of the upper atmosphere. And the shapes. The aurora does not simply glow steadily. It moves constantly in patterns that have given it its many names across human cultures. To the Norse, these lights were the Bifrost, the shimmering rainbow bridge between the world of humans and the realm of the gods. To the Finnish, they were foxfire, the tail of a cosmic fox running across the sky and scattering sparks. To some indigenous peoples of North America, they were the spirits of ancestors dancing. They do look like dancing. A curtain of greenish light appears in the north, stretching from horizon to horizon, folding and rippling like a fabric held by invisible hands in a slow wind. Then suddenly the pace changes and the curtains begin to move faster, sweeping across the sky in great shuddering waves, brightening and fading and brightening again. Rays shoot upward from the brightest regions, like searchlights pointed at the zenith of the sky. A corona forms directly overhead, a halo of converging rays, all aimed as a single point above you, as if the sky itself is folding inward toward some vanishing point beyond the atmosphere. And then, as quickly as it intensified, it softens again. The curtains slow, the rays dissolve, the sky returns to its ordinary darkness, and you are left in the cold air with snow under your boots, and the stars very clear and very still above, and the memory of what you just saw hanging in your mind like a half-remembered dream. The aurora is not rare exactly. It happens regularly, every night in the polar regions when conditions are right. It is simply mostly invisible to the people who don't live near the poles. In exceptionally strong solar events, the aurora can extend much further toward the equator. There are historical records of people in France and Italy, and even further south, seeing the northern lights during particularly intense geomagnetic storms, the red aurora painting the sky in the middle latitudes, where no one had any framework for understanding it. In 1859, a solar storm of extreme intensity, now called the Carrington event, after the British astronomer Richard Carrington, who observed the solar flare that preceded it, struck Earth with a force that has not been matched since. The aurora was visible across the entire planet, all the way to the tropics. In the Rocky Mountains, gold miners were woken from sleep by light so bright they thought it was morning. In Boston, people read newspapers by the light of the aurora alone. The telegraph networks of the day, the internet of the 19th century, were overwhelmed. Some telegraph operators reported receiving shocks from their equipment.
Others found they could send and receive messages, even with their telegraph machines disconnected from their power supplies, running entirely on the current induced in the wires by the aurora above.
That was 166 years ago. The world we have built since then, the power grids, the communications satellites, the GPS networks, the financial systems that run on continuous electronic function, is far more dependent on the stability of the electromagnetic environment than the telegraph networks of 1859 were. Scientists and engineers take the possibility of another Carrington scale event seriously. But tonight, let us not think about that. Tonight, let us only think about the beauty of it. The sun sending its fire outward across space, the Earth's magnetic field catching it and channeling it toward the poles, the high atmosphere lighting up in colors that have no practical purpose, that serve no function, except if we allow ourselves the conceit to be magnificent. There are people in Norway and Iceland and Alaska and northern Canada and Finland and Russia who see this on a regular basis, who walk outside on clear nights in winter and simply look up and watch the sky do something that has no name for its full significance, something that language gestures at but cannot quite reach. Imagine standing under it right now, the cold air on your face, the stars very bright and very still, and across the northern sky a slow shuddering curtain of green and white, folding and rippling and shifting, lit by particles from a star 93 million miles away, colliding with the air above your head. The sky is alive up there, quietly, constantly, invisibly alive. Rest beneath it now. Section 8. The sound of the earth. Rivers, rain, wind, and whale song.
Before we had language, before we had fire, before we had tools, we had the sounds of the earth, the sound of rain on leaves, the sound of a river moving over stones, the sound of wind in grass or through the branches of a forest in autumn, the low rumble of distant thunder, the high, clear note of a bird before dawn. These sounds are old in ways that go beyond culture or history. They are built into us. The human nervous system responds to the sound of running water with a measurable calming effect, reducing cortisol, slowing the heart rate, easing the breath. The sound of rain, statistically, is one of the most popular sleep aids in human experience. There are apps and devices dedicated to reproducing it, sold to the millions of people who find that no synthesized white noise quite works as well as something that sounds like rain. We miss these sounds, even when we are not consciously aware of missing them. The earth is never, in its natural state, truly silent. Even in the deepest wilderness, on the stillest night, there is sound. Wind moving through something, water moving somewhere, an insect, a frog, an owl, the distant percussion of surf, the tick and settle of cooling stone, the creak of a tree bending in a light breeze and returning. There is a concept in ecology called the soundscape. The soundscape of a healthy ecosystem is an intricate, layered thing. Dozens and hundreds of species, each occupying different acoustic niches, the way they occupy different spatial niches. Insects fill the high frequencies. Frogs tend to occupy the mid-range. Birds spread across a wide spectrum, but each species tends to have its particular pitch and rhythm. The soundscape of a healthy forest at dawn is a composition of such complexity that no human composer has ever matched it, not because it is beyond our capacity to hear, but because it was assembled by millions of years of evolution with no goal other than to work, and working meant not stepping on each other's frequencies. When a soundscape is recorded and analyzed, healthy ecosystems sound rich and full. Degraded ecosystems sound thin and sparse. Researchers can assess the health of a reef or a forest or a meadow just by recording its sound and analyzing the frequency distribution. You can hear the presence or absence of life. The ocean has its own soundscape, and it is one of the most unexpected things about the sea. We think of the ocean as silent, or as the source of a simple rhythmic surf sound. But beneath the surface, the ocean is an extraordinarily busy acoustic environment. The snapping shrimp are among the noisiest animals in the ocean, tiny creatures that produce sounds by snapping their claws shut at extraordinary speed, creating a cavitation bubble that collapses with a crack loud enough to stun small prey. A colony of snapping shrimp on a coral reef produces such constant, dense, overlapping snaps that the overall effect is a continuous crackling roar that can be heard for hundreds of meters.
Blue whales, the largest animals that have ever lived on Earth, as far as we know, produce calls so low in frequency that they are largely below the range of human hearing. These infrasound calls can travel thousands of kilometers through the ocean, made possible in part by that SOFAR channel we visited earlier. The blue whale's call can be so loud, up to 180 decibels, that it ranks among the loudest biological sounds ever recorded, louder than a jet engine, louder than a gunshot, generated by the largest throat attached to the largest body in the history of life on Earth. And yet, to human ears, a blue whale song sounds like a low, slow, mournful moan, a sound with so much bass it vibrates in the chest before it registers in the ears, something between music and geology. Rain, too, has a complex acoustic life beneath the ocean surface. The sound of heavy rainfall striking the ocean is one of the most effective sound maskers in the marine environment. A white noise from above that rolls through the water column and fills the frequency spectrum in ways that marine animals have learned to work around or wait out. Underwater recordings of rain sound like a vast, soft rushing, enormously different from the distinct patter of rain on a roof or a pond, more continuous, more all-encompassing, more like being inside the rain than beneath it.
Rivers have their own character. A slow, deep river in a lowland meadow sounds almost like silence, a low, continuous murmur that barely distinguishes itself from the ambient sound of the landscape. A mountain stream is a different world entirely, the high, clear, constantly changing chatter of water moving over uneven stones, each little rapid and pool and riffle producing its own note in the composite song. The sound of a waterfall can fill a valley completely, a white noise so complete and so consistent that everything else, the birds, the insects, the wind, exists inside it rather than alongside it. Wind in different landscapes makes profoundly different sounds. Wind moving through a stand of bamboo, those thin, hollow stems rubbing against each other, makes a sound like distant, irregular percussion. Wind moving through a pine forest makes a deep, resonant rush, the needles offering more friction than the flat surfaces of broadleaf trees. Wind moving through an open grassland has a different quality yet, a continuous flowing hiss that changes pitch with the topography of the land. There is a sound called the Aeolian tone, named for Aeolus, the Greek god of wind, that is produced when wind moves past a thin object at the right speed. Telegraph wires produce this sound in strong winds, a low, eerie hum that rises and falls with the wind speed. The rigging of sailing ships in a storm produces it. Even a single thin branch in a gale can produce a version of it. It is one of the oldest non-biological sounds the atmosphere makes, a sound that has been occurring on Earth since long before any living thing existed to hear it.
The Earth's interior makes sounds too, though mostly at frequencies too low for human hearing. Earthquakes produce seismic waves that move through the body of the planet, and the planet's own normal modes, the frequencies at which the entire Earth vibrates, the way a bell vibrates, occur at incredibly low frequencies, the lowest being a period of about 54 minutes. The entire planet rings like a very large, very slow bell in response to earthquakes. Scientists can detect this ringing with sensitive seismometers and listen to the Earth's own resonant tones. Below the threshold of consciousness, beneath the sounds of the night around you, the Earth is humming its own frequency. It has always been humming. It was humming the day you were born. It will be humming long after the quietest night you ever spent has been forgotten. Let that low, patient hum carry you now into the softness of sleep. Section 9. Soil, the living ground beneath your feet. We tend to think of soil as simply dirt, the brown stuff underfoot, the thing you track in from the garden that needs to be cleaned off the floor. Inert, passive, unchanging. This is one of the most significant misunderstandings we carry about the natural world. Soil is not dirt. Soil is alive. Profoundly, incomprehensibly, extravagantly alive.
A single teaspoon of healthy soil, not exceptional soil, not jungle soil, just ordinary healthy garden soil, contains approximately 1 billion bacteria. It contains perhaps 100,000 fungi, roughly 10,000 protozoa, and various numbers of nematodes, mites, springtails, earthworms, beetle larvae, and other creatures visible and invisible. All of them living their short, busy lives in a medium so rich with food and chemistry that it supports densities of life that exceed almost any other environment on the surface of the Earth. To put that in perspective, there are approximately 8 billion people on Earth. There are 1 billion bacteria in a single teaspoon of soil. In an acre of healthy farmland, the total weight of earthworms alone exceeds the weight of all the cattle that could graze on that acre. The soil is not just alive, it is one of the densest concentrations of life on the planet. And it is doing work, constantly, quietly, without any instruction or oversight. Bacteria in the soil break down dead plant material and release the nutrients locked within it back into forms that living roots can absorb. Fungi extend their thread-like hyphae through the soil in networks that connect plants and decompose organic material and form protective sheaths around roots. Earthworms, Charles Darwin devoted a substantial portion of his later career to studying them and concluded they were among the most important animals in the world, move through the soil, ingesting it, digesting organic matter from it, and excreting it in forms that vastly improve soil structure and fertility. A single earthworm can process several grams of soil per day, A healthy population of earthworms in an acre of land can collectively move and process dozens of tons of soil per year. The relationship between plants and soil microorganisms is one of the most ancient and fundamental partnerships in the living world. Mycorrhizal fungi, the underground network we encountered in the forest section, colonize the roots of approximately 90% of land plant species. They extend the effective reach of root systems by many orders of magnitude, allowing plants to access water and phosphorus and other nutrients from much larger volumes of soil than their roots alone could exploit. In return, the plants feed sugars to the fungi, sugars produced from sunlight through photosynthesis and channeled downward through the roots into the underground network. This partnership is old. Fossil evidence of mycorrhizal relationships has been found in plant fossils from around 450 million years ago, early in the history of land plants. When the first plants colonized the land from the sea, they almost certainly did so with fungal partners already attached to their roots, assisting them in extracting nutrients from the bare, lifeless rock they were trying to grow in. The fungi helped make soil possible. The soil they helped make possible supported the plants. The plants fed the fungi. And over millions of years, this interlocking partnership transformed bare rock and volcanic plains into the deep, rich, biologically complex soils that cover the vegetated parts of the planet today. It takes, on average, somewhere between 100 and 1,000 years to form a single centimeter of topsoil. The deep, rich soils of the world's great agricultural regions, the prairies of North America, the steppes of Eurasia, the plains of China, represent thousands or even tens of thousands of years of slow, patient accumulation. There is also a sound to soil, inaudible to human ears, but real. The hyphae of fungi growing through soil make tiny cracking sounds as they push through particles. Bacteria release gases as they metabolize. Small creatures move through the pore spaces of the soil, displacing air and water. The chemical reactions happening in a handful of soil at any given moment are of such variety and such number that were they scaled up to perceptible levels, the whole thing would be deafeningly busy. But at human scale, the soil is simply there, patient and dark and cool, holding the root of everything. Then there is the concept of soil formation itself, or pedogenesis as scientists call it, the slow, ancient process by which bare rock becomes living earth. It begins with physical and chemical weathering, water and ice and heat expanding into cracks in rock and breaking it apart, acids produced by early microbes dissolving mineral surfaces, the freeze-thaw cycles of seasons gradually reducing stones to gravel and gravel to sand. It ends, after hundreds or thousands of years, with a rich, dark medium containing mineral particles of many sizes, organic matter in various stages of decomposition, water, air, and a living community of such density and diversity that it defies easy description. The color of soil tells a story. Dark soils are rich in organic matter, the accumulated, partially decomposed remains of generations of plants and animals. Red soils have been weathered under warm, humid conditions that oxidize the iron in the minerals, effectively rusting the soil. Yellow soils contain iron in a different oxidation state. White or grey soils may be very old and highly leached, their nutrients long washed away. Or they may have formed in waterlogged conditions that produced pale, mineral-depleted layers. The black soils of the American prairies and the Russian steppes are among the most fertile on the planet. The black color comes from a substance called humus, not the food, but the stable, complex organic matter formed when plant and animal material is broken down through so many biochemical steps by so many organisms that the original identity of the material is lost, and what remains is a dark, spongy, carbon-rich substance that holds water, feeds plants, and gives the soil its characteristic smell. Geosmin again, that earthy, rain on dry ground scent, is released by soil bacteria living in humus. When you hold a handful of good soil, you are holding something that took centuries to form. Soil that is a meter deep may represent 10,000 years of geological and biological work. Soil scientists have found intact soil profiles, undisturbed vertical cross-sections through soil from surface to bedrock, that contain layers marking different eras of climate and vegetation, each layer a record of its time. The soil is an archive, a slow, biological, unintentional archive of the history of the land. Agriculturalists from every culture in history have understood, at some intuitive level, the extraordinary value of healthy soil. The earliest farming communities in the Fertile Crescent, in the river valleys of Asia, in the highlands of the Americas, all centered themselves on the most fertile soils they could find, the dark alluvial soils of river floodplains, enriched by the minerals and organic matter carried down from upstream and deposited when the rivers flooded. They followed the soil. They learned to tend it, to rest it, to return organic material to it. They understood, without the language of microbiology, that the life of the soil was the life of the civilization. Tonight, while you sleep, the soil beneath your house, beneath the concrete and the foundations, is alive. Something is decomposing in it. Something is being mineralized. Something is slowly, patiently transforming. The earthworms are moving, if there are any. The bacteria are dividing, as they have been dividing every 20 minutes or so for 4 billion years. The fungi are extending their hyphae through the dark, measuring the distances between things in the only unit they understand, the width of a single thread. The ground holds you up, the living ground, full of its invisible, patient, extravagant life. The Moon is the largest natural satellite relative to its planet in the solar system. It is so large relative to Earth that some astronomers have suggested calling the Earth-Moon system a double planet rather than a planet and its satellite. From the Moon's surface, Earth would appear about 4 times larger in the sky than the Moon appears from Earth, glowing blue and white, slowly rotating over the course of a long lunar day. The Moon has no atmosphere to speak of. Its surface is covered in fine grey dust called regolith, the accumulated product of billions of years of micrometeorite impacts pulverizing the surface rock. There is no wind to disturb this dust, no rain to wash it, no life to move it. The boot prints left by the Apollo astronauts in 1969 are still there, preserved in the regolith exactly as they were made. They will remain there unchanged for millions of years until the slow rain of micrometeorites gradually erodes them away. The Moon makes no sound, but it does something quiet and continuous and extraordinary for the Earth. It pulls. The gravitational influence of the moon on Earth is detectable in two main ways that are relevant to our lives: the tides and the stabilization of Earth's axial tilt. The tides are familiar. The ocean is pulled toward the moon by gravity, creating a bulge of water on the side of Earth facing the moon, and by an inertial effect, an approximately equal bulge on the opposite side. As the Earth rotates beneath these bulges, coastal regions experience the rhythmic rise and fall of water we call the tides. Most places experience 2 high tides and 2 low tides every approximately 24 hours and 50 minutes. The extra 50 minutes because the moon is also moving in its orbit, so the Earth has to rotate a little further each day to catch up to the moon's position. The tidal range varies enormously by location. In the open ocean, far from coasts, tidal variation is only about half a meter. But in coastal areas where the geometry of the seabed and the shoreline funnels and amplifies the tidal movement, the range can be extreme. The Bay of Fundy in Canada, between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, experiences the highest tides in the world. The water level can differ by as much as 16 meters between low tide and high tide. That is roughly the height of a 5-story building, rising and falling twice a day, driven by the moon's gentle pull from 250,000 miles away. The tides have enormous ecological importance. The intertidal zone, the strip of coastline that is sometimes underwater and sometimes exposed, is one of the most productive and biologically diverse habitats on the planet. Barnacles and mussels and sea stars and anemones and crabs and hundreds of other species have evolved to live in a world that alternates between ocean and air with clockwork regularity. The tides also drive nutrient cycling in coastal waters, mixing deep and shallow water and bringing mineral-rich water from offshore into coastal ecosystems. But there is something less commonly discussed about the moon that is, in its own quiet way, even more profound. The moon stabilizes the Earth's axial tilt. Earth spins on an axis that is currently tilted about 23.5 degrees relative to its orbit around the Sun. This tilt is the reason for the seasons. The northern hemisphere tips towards the Sun in summer, receiving more direct sunlight and longer days. It tips away in winter. Without this tilt, there would be no seasons. The Sun would always be directly above the equator, and the poles would be in perpetual cold darkness. But the tilt doesn't have to be 23.5 degrees. Gravitational interactions between the planets can, over long periods of time, cause the axial tilt to change. Mars, which has no large moon, has an axial tilt that is currently similar to Earth's, about 25 degrees, but over millions of years, Mars's tilt can vary wildly, between 0 and over 60 degrees. When Mars's tilt is extreme, its climate must be dramatically different from what it is at the current tilt. Earth's large moon acts as a gravitational stabilizer, damping out the tendency of Earth's axial tilt to drift. Without the moon, Earth's tilt might vary chaotically over millions of years, swinging between extremes that would cause climate changes so severe that complex life might struggle to persist. The presence of a large, stabilizing moon may be one of the reasons Earth has been able to maintain the relatively stable, livable climate that allowed complex life to evolve and persist over hundreds of millions of years. The moon also appears to have played a role in the origin of life itself. The tidal cycles it drives create intertidal zones where water alternately concentrates and dilutes, where organic molecules can undergo chemical reactions in shallow pools, where conditions cycle regularly between wet and dry. Some researchers have proposed that the tidal rhythms created by the moon may have helped catalyze the chemical reactions that eventually led to the first self-replicating molecules, the very origins of life. And there is something else, something simpler and older than any of this. For every human being who has ever lived, in every culture and every era, the moon has been there. Every parent who has ever walked a sleepless child to a window in the middle of the night has seen the same moon. Every soldier on night watch, every traveller navigating by moonlight, every fisherman reading the tides, every poet who ever looked up at the sky and tried to put into words the feeling that the universe is very large and very beautiful, and we are very small within it. They all saw this same moon. It is the most constant and the most visible of all the large-scale natural phenomena available to human experience. Cultures on every continent have found meaning in it, tracked time by it, organized their rituals and their planting seasons and their poetry around it. It is still there tonight, perhaps hidden behind clouds, or on the other side of the building, or simply outside the window you cannot see. It is pulling the ocean right now, as it always is, raising the water on the side of Earth that faces it, lowering it on the sides that face away. Quietly, faithfully, as it has been doing for 4.5 billion years. The Himalayas, the highest mountain range on Earth, home to Mount Everest and dozens of other peaks above 7,000 meters, are the result of the collision between the Indian subcontinent and the Eurasian plate. About 50 million years ago, India was an island continent moving northward, and the Tethys Sea, a warm, shallow inland sea, lay between it and Asia. Over millions of years, India closed the distance, the Tethys Sea shrinking and disappearing. And about 40 to 50 million years ago, the Indian plate began colliding with the Eurasian plate. The collision has been crumpling the crust upward ever since, pushing the Himalayas higher. They are still rising. Mount Everest grows approximately 4 to 5 millimeters each year, pushed upward by the continuing pressure of the Indian plate moving north. The rocks near the summit of Everest contain fossils of marine organisms. Creatures that lived on the floor of a warm, shallow sea 50 million years ago are now locked in stone at almost 9,000 meters above sea level, in the atmosphere thin enough to kill an unacclimatized climber in hours. The summit of the world's highest mountain was once the bottom of a sea. Glaciers are perhaps the most visually patient things on Earth. A glacier is simply a river of ice, a body of snow accumulated over years and decades, compressed by its own weight into dense blue-tinted ice and moving downhill under the influence of gravity. But they move at the pace of glaciers, which is to say almost imperceptibly slowly in human terms. A typical alpine glacier might advance only a few tens of meters in a year. The great ice sheets of Antarctica and Greenland move somewhat faster in places, but the interior of the Antarctic ice sheet is essentially stationary on human timescales. What glaciers do in their slow, cold passage is reshape the land. A glacier is not a gentle force. It is a million-ton blade of ice dragging itself over bedrock, picking up and carrying rocks embedded in its base, grinding the bedrock smooth, carving valleys into U-shapes, scooping out the basins that later become lakes, leaving behind the mounds and ridges of material it carried when it finally melts. The Great Lakes of North America, Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario, are glacially carved basins, scoured out by the advance and retreat of massive ice sheets during the last ice age. The fjords of Norway and Alaska, those deep, sheer-walled inlets of the sea, are valleys carved by glaciers and then flooded as sea levels rose when the ice sheets melted. The gentle, rolling hills of the northern European plain and the similar hills of the American Midwest are landscapes left behind by glaciers that retreated about 10,000 years ago. Ice holds an enormous amount of water. Currently, about 69% of all the fresh water on Earth is locked in ice, in the ice sheets of Antarctica and Greenland, and in the world's mountain glaciers. If all of that ice melted, sea levels would rise by roughly 65 to 70 meters, flooding the coastal plains and cities where a very large fraction of humanity currently lives. But in the context of Earth's history, the current period, the ice age we are technically still in, though in an interglacial warm period, is not the coldest time, and there have been times far colder. About 717 million years ago, in a period sometimes called Snowball Earth, the planet appears to have been almost entirely covered in ice. The glaciers extended from the poles to the tropics. The oceans were covered or nearly covered by ice kilometers thick. The average surface temperature may have been around -50 degrees Celsius. Life survived, apparently in liquid water cockets maintained by the heat of volcanic activity beneath the ice, but it was a near thing. And the Earth recovered. The volcanic activity that continued even as the surface froze slowly released carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and with no liquid water to absorb it through the normal weathering processes, the CO2 accumulated until its greenhouse effect was strong enough to melt the ice, and when the melt began, it was abrupt. The ice-covered planet, once it started warming, would have warmed extremely rapidly, and the frozen ocean would have opened into a steaming world far warmer than today in a geologically short time. The planet recovered from Snowball Earth, as it has recovered from every other extreme event in its long history. It is resilient in ways that are almost incomprehensible, in part because it has so much time, millions and millions of years to adjust, to cycle, to find new equilibria. The mountains know this patience. They rise and erode on timescales that make even the ice ages look brief. And their very existence speaks to the vitality of the planet, to the fact that the Earth's interior is still hot enough, the plates still moving, the forces still active. A geologically dead planet would have flat, eroded plains and shallow, sediment-filled ocean basins. Mountains are evidence that something is still happening down below, that the engine is still running. There are mountain ranges that have been eroded almost completely away, their peaks worn down to roots, their former grandeur detectable now only in the chemistry of the rocks and the deformation of ancient strata. The Appalachians of eastern North America, modest rolling hills today, were once a range comparable to the modern Himalayas, pushed up by the collision of tectonic plates nearly 300 million years ago, and since then slowly, patiently worn away by water and ice and wind into the gentle forested ridgelines they are today. 300 million years of erosion. Every grain of rock that once stood as a peak thousands of meters above the ancient sea
has been transported by rivers to the ocean, laid down as sediment on the continental shelves, and in some cases subducted back into the mantle and melted back into the magma that eventually becomes new rock. The rock cycle, like the water cycle, is a closed loop running on geological time.
You are living on a planet that is, in the most literal sense, continuously recycling itself. The carbon in your body was once, billions of years ago, locked in rock. It was released by volcanism, incorporated into early organic molecules, passed through billions of generations of living things, locked in coal and oil and limestone, released again, returned to the atmosphere, fixed by photosynthesis, and eventually found its way to you. The iron in your blood was forged in the nuclear furnace of a dead star, scattered in its explosion, incorporated into the dust cloud that became the solar system, concentrated in the forming Earth, circulated through the mantle, brought to the surface by volcanism, dissolved by rain, carried by rivers to the sea, incorporated into living things. You are, in the most literal possible sense, made of the oldest stuff there is. The universe recycled into something that breathes and thinks and lies quietly in the dark on a spring night, listening to the silence. Sleep gently. The mountains are patient. The glaciers are slow. The rock cycle turns on a timescale that makes even the deepest human history look like a single afternoon. Section 12. The migration of everything. Birds, whales, and butterflies. Every year, on a schedule that is older than any human calendar, the animals begin to move.
The Arctic tern leaves its breeding grounds in the Arctic as the summer ends and flies south. Not just south to somewhere warmer, but all the way south to the Antarctic. From one pole to the other, a round-trip distance of roughly 70,000 kilometers per year, the longest migration of any animal on Earth. The terns that make this journey experience more daylight than any other creature on the planet, spending both of the Earth's summers chasing the sunlit poles. In a lifetime of 30 years or more, an Arctic tern may travel a distance equivalent to going to the moon and back 3 times. They do this without maps, without instruments, without anyone to tell them where to go. Navigation for migratory birds involves a complex combination of cues: the position of the sun, the pattern of the stars, the Earth's magnetic field felt through something in their beaks or their inner ears, the smell of the air, the landscape below. Some birds appear to have something like a biological compass that detects the inclination of the Earth's magnetic field lines, telling them not just which direction is north, but also which latitude they are at. They navigate with a precision that our best technology only equaled very recently. The bar-tailed godwit, a shorebird about the size of a large pigeon, migrates each year from its breeding grounds in Alaska across the Pacific Ocean to New Zealand, a non-stop flight of roughly 11,000 kilometers. No refueling, no stopover. Just 11,000 kilometers of open ocean, crossing which takes approximately 9 to 11 days of continuous flight. Before departure, the godwit doubles its body weight in a few weeks of intense feeding, building up fat reserves that will fuel the entire journey. It also shrinks some of its non-essential organs, intestines, liver, to reduce weight and redirect the protein to fuel its flight muscles. Monarch butterflies, delicate orange and black, weighing about half a gram, migrate each autumn from their summer breeding grounds across Canada and the northern United States to a small area of forest in the mountains of central Mexico, a journey of up to 4,800 kilometers. No individual butterfly makes the entire round trip. It takes 3 to 5 generations to complete the cycle. The butterflies that travel to Mexico have never been there before. Their ancestors made the same journey the previous year, and yet they find the same forests, in some cases the same specific trees where previous generations overwintered. How do they know where to go? The mechanisms of monarch navigation are not fully understood, but they appear to use the position of the sun combined with a time-compensated internal clock that allows them to account for the sun's changing position throughout the day. They also appear to use the Earth's magnetic field as a backup system. In the ocean, the migrations are even larger in scale.
Humpback whales migrate between polar feeding grounds, where the cold, productive waters of the Arctic and Antarctic support enormous populations of krill and small fish, and tropical breeding grounds where the waters are warmer and calmer for raising calves. In both the northern and southern hemispheres, humpbacks make round trips of up to 16,000 kilometers each year, navigating by a combination of the Earth's magnetic field, the positions of the sun and stars, and possibly the sound channel of the deep ocean. Grey whales migrate between their feeding grounds in the cold, rich waters of the Bering and Chukchi seas and their breeding and calving lagoons in the warm waters of Baja California, a round trip of roughly 18,000 to 20,000 kilometers, one of the longest migrations of any mammal. Salmon are born in freshwater rivers, spend years growing in the open ocean, and then return to the exact rivers, sometimes the exact streams, where they were born, to spawn and die. They navigate the open ocean by the Earth's magnetic field and find their home rivers by smell, recognizing the unique chemical signature of the water where they were born. All of this movement, birds over oceans, butterflies across continents, whales through the deep cold, salmon home to their rivers, is happening right now, somewhere on Earth. It is happening this season, this month, this night. Animals are on their way to somewhere, following routes laid down by evolution over millions of years, navigating by the sun and the stars and the magnetic field and the smell of the water.
Consider the European eel, one of the most mysterious migrants in the natural world. Eels live for years, sometimes decades, in the rivers and lakes and marshes of Europe. They hide under stones in rivers. They lurk in the muddy margins of lakes. They are creatures of fresh water for most of their adult lives. And then, at some point, triggered by a biological clock that we do not fully understand, they change. Their eyes grow larger, their bodies shift from the yellow-brown of their freshwater form to silver, a color more suited to the deep ocean, and they begin to move. They swim downriver, out to the coast, and then out to sea. They travel across the Atlantic Ocean, roughly 5,000 to 7,000 kilometers, to a warm, mysterious region of the ocean called the Sargasso Sea, a vast, calm, seaweed-filled gyre in the middle of the North Atlantic. There, in the warm, clear water, they spawn and die, and the tiny, leaf-thin larvae drift in the ocean currents for months, eventually arriving on European coasts as glass eels, transparent, barely visible, beginning the cycle again. No adult eel has ever been observed spawning in the Sargasso Sea. The journey has never been directly witnessed. Researchers have tagged adult eels departing European coasts and tracked them into the open Atlantic. And then, silence. The tags stop reporting. The eels are never seen again alive as adults. The Sargasso Sea has always received the eggs and sent back the larvae, but the adults vanish completely into its deep, warm, weed-covered waters. There is something profound about that, about a mystery so fundamental that the entire life history of a common fish remained incomplete until very recently, and is still not fully understood. The eels know where to go. They have always known. The knowing is written into them, part of the vast, ancient script of biology that governs migration. The earth is full of creatures in motion, moving through their ancient patterns as they have always moved. And the fact that most of this motion is invisible to most of us, happening in the dark ocean and the open sky and the root systems of forests and the pore spaces of soil, that invisibility does not diminish it. If anything, it adds to the sense of a planet that is quietly, constantly, extravagantly alive. All of it unfolding tonight while you rest. Section 13. The night sky as seen from Earth. Stars, stillness, and scale. On a clear, dark night, far from city lights, you can see with the naked eye approximately 2,000 to 2,500 individual stars. 2,000 points of light, each one a sun. Each one a star in its own right, with its own temperature and mass and age, and, potentially, its own planets. The Milky Way is visible on truly dark nights as a band of pale light arcing across the sky. Not a feature of the sky, exactly, but the accumulated light of hundreds of billions of stars, too distant and too faint to see individually, their combined glow creating a river of light across the dome of night. We are looking at this from inside it. The Milky Way is our galaxy, a barred spiral perhaps 100,000 light-years in diameter, and the Sun and Earth and everything familiar sits on a minor spiral arm, roughly 26,000 light-years from the center. The light of the most distant stars you can see with the naked eye left those stars hundreds or even thousands of years ago. When you look at the night sky, you are not seeing the sky as it is, you are seeing the sky as it was. A composite image built from light that traveled at 300,000 kilometers per second for different lengths of time to reach your eye simultaneously. The star that appears to be a neighbor of a nearby star may be 10 times further away, its light simply taking longer to arrive. The night sky is a temporal collage. Some of the stars you can see tonight no longer exist. They exploded in supernovae centuries or millennia ago, and the light of that explosion is still traveling towards us, perhaps to arrive in a few hundred years as a brilliant new star appearing where no star was before.
The scale of it is genuinely difficult to hold in the mind without some sense of vertigo. The nearest star to our Sun, Proxima Centauri, is approximately 4.2 light-years away. A light-year is the distance light travels in 1 year, about 9.5 trillion kilometers. Proxima Centauri is therefore about 40 trillion kilometers away from us. If you could travel in a spacecraft at the speed of our fastest current probes, roughly 60,000 kilometers per hour, the journey to Proxima Centauri would take approximately 75,000 years. And Proxima Centauri is next door. The observable universe extends about 46 billion light-years in every direction from Earth. It contains an estimated 2 trillion galaxies. Each galaxy contains, on average, hundreds of billions of stars. The number of stars in the observable universe is estimated to be somewhere around 2 times 10 to the 23rd power, a number so large that there is no scale of human experience in which it becomes meaningful.
The famous astronomer Carl Sagan wrote about a photograph taken by the Voyager 1 spacecraft in 1990, when mission controllers turned the camera back toward the inner solar system from a distance of about 6 billion kilometers. In the photograph, Earth appears as a tiny point of light, pale blue, barely distinguishable from the scattered light of the image itself. Sagan called it the pale blue dot, and wrote about it with a tenderness and a sense of perspective that has not diminished with time. Everything you know is on that dot. Every person you have loved, every place you have lived, every book ever written, every battle ever fought, every meal ever shared, every quiet evening like this one, all of it contained on that point of pale blue light, suspended in the dark. There is something about that perspective that is simultaneously humbling and deeply comforting. The enormity of the universe could feel isolating. Instead, many people find it quieting, placing our anxieties in a context so vast that they become for a moment proportionate to their actual weight in the universe, which is very small. And that is fine. That is, in a way, a relief.
Let us also sit for a moment with the fact of starlight itself.
When you look at a star, you are not seeing the star as it is now. You are seeing it as it was when the light you are receiving left its surface. The star Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, visible as a bright, steady, slightly blue-white light in the constellation Canis Major, is about 8.5 light-years away. The light entering your eyes from Sirius tonight left that star approximately 8.5 years ago. You are seeing the past. The star Rigel, the brightest star in Orion, is approximately 860 light-years away. The light from Rigel that you can see tonight left that star during the medieval period, roughly around the time of the Crusades or the building of Gothic cathedrals in Europe. When that light departed Rigel, no human being on Earth had yet seen a printing press or a telescope or any of the other things that define what we call the modern world. And the stars in the faint band of the Milky Way, the distant ones, visible only as a collective glow, their light may have travelled tens of thousands of years to reach your eyes on this particular night. You are, when you look at the night sky, a kind of receiver for messages from the past. Each photon arriving at your retina carries information about a source that may no longer exist in the form it had when the light departed. Some of those stars have already died. The light of their deaths may be on its way to us now, a brilliant flash of supernova light that some future generation will watch appear in the sky as a new bright star, visible in daylight, then fading over months to nothing. The sky is a record, a slow, beautiful, incomprehensibly vast record of everything that has shone and burned and exploded in a sphere of space growing at the speed of light around this small, patient planet. The stars will be there when you wake up tomorrow, even if you cannot see them. They are always there, behind the blue sky, burning in their patient billions. The Earth turns beneath them, as it has for 4.5 billion years, and will for billions more. Tonight, you are one small, warm breathing point on the surface of the pale blue dot, and the universe is very large around you, and very quiet, and very old, and in its own way, very beautiful. Water is extraordinarily old. The water you drink, the water in your blood, in your cells, in the glass on your nightstand, has been cycling through the Earth's systems for billions of years. The hydrogen atoms in a glass of water may have been part of the early solar system before the Earth even formed. Some of the water on Earth arrived via comets and asteroids, water ice delivered from the cold outer regions of the solar system in the period of heavy bombardment 4 billion years ago. Water is the only substance that exists in all three phases, solid, liquid, and gas, within the normal range of temperatures at Earth's surface. This is no coincidence. It is precisely this range, this narrow window of temperature, that makes the Earth suitable for liquid water. And it is the liquid state, mobile, dissolving, transporting, cycling, that makes Earth's chemistry possible. Life, as we know it, depends on liquid water in ways so fundamental that it is essentially impossible to imagine life without it. The water cycle is one of the most elegant processes on the planet. Water evaporates from the oceans, warmed by sunlight, rising as invisible water vapor into the atmosphere. It condenses into clouds. It falls as rain and snow. It flows downhill in rivers and streams. It seeps into the soil and percolates down to aquifers and travels underground, sometimes for decades or centuries, before emerging as a spring or seeping into a river. It reaches the ocean again and evaporates again. This cycle has been running for as long as there has been liquid water on Earth. The rain that falls tonight on a forest in the Pacific Northwest has been rain before, thousands of times. It has been ocean and cloud and river and glacier. It has been inside a fern and inside a salmon, and evaporated from the skin of animals that no longer exist. Rivers are particularly beautiful agents of this cycle. The longest river on Earth, the Nile, flows for about 6,650 kilometers from its most distant source in the highlands of Rwanda and Burundi, through the lakes of East Africa and the vast marshes of the Sud in South Sudan and the desert of Sudan and Egypt, and empties into the Mediterranean Sea. The volume of water it carries is modest compared to the great tropical rivers. The Amazon carries roughly 60 times as much water, but the Nile's length is extraordinary, and the civilizations that grew along its banks were among the first in human history, supported by the rich silt the river deposited in its annual floods. The Amazon River carries more water than the next 7 largest rivers on Earth combined. In the wet season, the Amazon floods millions of square kilometers of surrounding forest, creating vast flooded forests called varzea, where fish swim between the trees and river dolphins navigate through submerged vegetation. Some of the trees that grow in these flooded forests can survive being submerged under several meters of water for months every year. But rivers do not need to be long or large to be beautiful. There is something universally soothing about the sound and sight of moving water. Small streams tumbling over stones in a mountain meadow have a quality of immediacy and presence that large rivers cannot quite match. Every sound is fresh. The specific arrangement of stones in that particular reach of that particular stream is unique, and the water negotiating those stones makes a sound that is uniquely that place, that moment, that specific combination of current and rock. The sound of a small stream at night in the dark close enough to hear from a tent or an open window, may be one of the most reliably sleep-inducing sounds that exists. There is something about the randomness within pattern, the constant sound that never repeats exactly, that bypasses the arousal system and invites the brain to let go of its vigilance. It is not silence, which can feel expectant. It is not a steady tone, which the brain can habituate to and then notice the absence of. It is endlessly, gently varied, like nothing so much as the murmur of a voice in another room, speaking comfortingly about nothing in particular. Water finds its way, eventually, to the lowest available point, always. Not because it plans to, not because it chooses to, but because that is what it does. It finds the path of least resistance and it follows it, all the way to the ocean, from wherever in the mountains it fell as snow, or wherever on the slope it fell as rain. There is something restful in that too, the patient inevitability of water, the certainty that it will find its way, that the cycle will continue, that the rain falling in the mountains tonight will be fog over the ocean in a few weeks or months, and cloud again after that, and rain again somewhere else. Consider groundwater, the vast invisible reservoir of water that exists in the pore spaces and fractures of rock and sediment beneath the Earth's surface. About 30% of all the fresh water on Earth is groundwater. Some of it is relatively recent, having seeped into the ground from rainfall in the last few years and still moving slowly towards the sea. Some of it, called fossil water or paleo water, has been underground for thousands or even millions of years. The Sahara Desert, which is today one of the driest places on Earth, sits above vast aquifers of fossil water that accumulated during a wetter period thousands of years ago, when the climate of North Africa was dramatically different, and the Sahara was covered in lakes and grasslands. A well drilled into these aquifers brings up ancient water, water that last saw sunlight when human civilization was just beginning to develop its first cities. Water that fell as rain in a world where lions and crocodiles roamed the region, where now only the desert wind moves over sand. Lakes, too, are part of this long water story. Lake Baikal in Siberia is the oldest lake in the world, roughly 25 to 30 million years old, and the deepest, reaching down nearly 1,640 meters. It contains approximately 20% of all the unfrozen surface fresh water on the planet. The life in Baikal evolved in isolation for so long that thousands of species found there exist nowhere else on Earth. The Baikal seal, called the Nerpa, is the only freshwater seal in the world, descended from ancestors that somehow reached this isolated inland lake millions of years ago. In winter, Lake Baikal freezes, and the ice is so clear that you can see through it to the water below. In spring, as the ice melts, it makes sounds, deep groans and high cracks and ringing tones that travel across the surface and echo off the mountains surrounding the lake. Locals call these sounds the singing of the ice, and the lake has been singing in this way every spring for millions of years. Water is patient. Water is ancient. Water is in you right now, carrying the oxygen in your blood, carrying the dissolved minerals that allow your nerves to fire and your heart to beat, and your brain to do whatever quiet, dissolving work it is doing as you approach sleep. Let it move slowly now. Let your thoughts move slowly. Let them drift, the way water drifts in the slow sections of a river, turning in long, lazy eddies before continuing downstream. Section 15. The Secret Life of the Seasons. Earth's Slow, Steady Breathing. Imagine watching the Earth from space over the course of a year, compressed into a time-lapse of a few minutes. You would see the white of the Arctic ice expanding and contracting like a slow breath. You would see the green of the northern hemisphere forests appearing, thickening, and then fading back to brown as the leaves fall. You would see the movement of weather systems across the oceans, great spiraling storms, and the long arcing sweep of cold fronts. You would see, if your time-lapse was sensitive enough to vegetation, the seasonal greening of the great grasslands and the blooming and fading of high-latitude tundra. The Earth breathes, not metaphorically, quite literally. In terms of the gas composition of its atmosphere, the Earth's atmosphere has a measurable seasonal pulse. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere decreases every spring and summer in the northern hemisphere as the forests and grasslands and crops green up and absorb carbon dioxide through photosynthesis. It rises every autumn and winter as the leaves fall and decompose and the soil releases CO2 and photosynthesis slows. The resulting oscillation is visible in the measurements taken at atmospheric monitoring stations around the world, a gentle, regular wave, several parts per million in amplitude, cycling with the northern hemisphere seasons. The Earth inhales in spring, exhales in autumn, breathes in time with the turning of its axis toward and away from the sun. The seasons are a consequence of Earth's tilt. That 23.5-degree lean means that as the Earth orbits the Sun, one hemisphere is tilted towards the Sun for part of the year, receiving more direct sunlight and longer days, and the other hemisphere is tilted away, receiving less. The Northern Hemisphere summer solstice, around the 21st of June, is the moment when the North Pole is tilted most directly towards the Sun, and the Northern Hemisphere receives the most daylight. At the Arctic Circle on that day, the Sun does not set. Further north still, at the pole itself, the Sun has been circling the horizon continuously since the spring equinox and will continue to do so until the autumn equinox. The summer solstice has been marked by human cultures for as long as there have been human cultures. Stonehenge, built on the Salisbury Plain of England over several stages between roughly 5,000 and 3,500 years ago, is oriented towards the sunrise on the summer solstice. The arrangement of its massive standing stones, some of them weighing over 25 tons and transported from quarries in Wales over 200 kilometers away, precisely frames the rising sun on the longest day of the year. People carried those stones for 200 kilometers and placed them with extraordinary precision to mark the moment the year begins to tilt back towards autumn. They knew the seasons, and they built monuments to the turning. Every season has its own sensory world. Spring in a temperate forest is one of the most sensory-rich environments on the planet. The first growth after winter, the tentative green of early leaves, the explosion of wildflowers on the forest floor racing to capture sunlight before the canopy closes, the return of migratory birds announcing themselves with songs that have been absent since autumn. The smell of spring is distinct and unmistakable, a combination of soil warming and decomposing leaf litter and new plant growth and rain on dry ground. That last smell, The smell of rain on dry ground has a name: petrichor. It was coined in 1964 by two Australian researchers who described it as the scent produced when rain falls on soil that has been dry, caused by a combination of oils released by plants during dry periods and a chemical called geosmin produced by soil bacteria. Geosmin is detectable by the human nose at extraordinarily low concentrations, as low as 5 parts per trillion, making it one of the things we are most sensitive to smelling. We are attuned to the smell of rain on dry earth with a sensitivity that suggests our ancestors, for a very long time, had good reasons to want to know when rain was coming.
Autumn has its own signature. The annual dying back of the deciduous forest is one of the most colourful events in the natural world. The reds and oranges and yellows of autumn leaves are not simply the result of the chlorophyll breaking down and revealing underlying pigments that accounts for the yellows. The reds and purples are produced by new pigments called anthocyanins that many trees actively produce as their leaves die, for reasons that are still debated among scientists. Some researchers suggest the anthocyanins signal to aphids and other insects that the tree is healthy and well defended, a kind of autumn warning display. Others suggest they protect the leaf while nutrients are being withdrawn back into the tree, acting as a sunscreen for the still active cellular processes happening as the leaf completes its work. Whatever the reason, the result is one of the most beautiful landscapes that the natural world produces. And it is transient, lasting a few weeks in any given location, before the leaves fall and the branches are bare, and the forest becomes its winter self, open and grey, and full of a different, quieter beauty. Winter has its beauty too. Snow transforms a landscape in the same way darkness transforms a room, not by adding to it, but by reducing it. A forest under snow is a study in contrast. Dark trunks and branches and the pristine white of snow on every horizontal surface, every branch angle accumulated with more snow. Sound is dampened, footsteps are softened. The usual layers of the landscape, the ground cover, the shrubs, the lower branches, are buried or transformed, and the geometry of the larger trees stands out with unusual clarity.
The quiet of snow, the way freshly fallen snow absorbs sound, is a real physical phenomenon. Snow is porous, and the air trapped within it absorbs sound energy. A heavy snowfall can reduce ambient noise levels measurably, and many people who live in northern climates describe the distinctive quality of silence that follows a fresh snowfall as one of the most complete and peaceful forms of quiet they know. The Earth's seasons are a long cycle that connects everything: the birth of leaves and the death of leaves, the return of birds and their departure, the rise and fall of rivers, the freezing of lakes and their thawing, the migration of animals following the warmth or the food that moves with the sun. All of it part of one slow, large, patient rhythm. Section 16. Closing. You are part of all of this. We have travelled a long way tonight, from the 4.5 billion year story of the planet's formation to the delicate seasonal rhythms that govern the leaves on a tree. We have visited the dark, glowing depths of the ocean and the cold, windswept heights where ancient trees grow 1 imperceptible millimetre per year. We have listened to the sounds of the planet, the whale songs travelling across ocean basins, the snap of deep-sea shrimp, the wind through a forest, the rain on dry earth. We have stood under the aurora and felt the magnetic field of the planet, channeling particles from the sun into curtains of slow, cold light.
We have looked up at the night sky and understood, just for a moment,
the scale of the universe within which this small, extraordinary planet spins. We have looked down at the soil and understood that the ground beneath us is not empty, but teeming, alive in every grain, working patiently in the dark, the way it has been working for billions of years. We have watched the mountains rise and the glaciers carve their patient valleys, and understood that the landscapes we take as permanent backdrops to our lives are temporary arrangements of rock that are very slowly, very patiently being rearranged by forces that do not hurry. We have followed the animals on their long migrations, the tern from pole to pole, the butterfly across a continent, the whale through the cold depths of an ocean, and understood that the earth is full of creatures living out their extraordinary purposes in ways that have nothing to do with us and everything to do with the ancient contracts between species and seasons and geography. We have visited the rain cycle and understood that the water falling tonight in a mountain forest has been rained thousands of times before and will be rained thousands of times again, that the water in your body has been in the ocean and in clouds and in the cells of creatures that lived in entirely different geological ages, that you are not separate from the water cycle, but part of it, a temporary reservoir holding water borrowed from the rain and the rivers, water that was ice in a glacier 50 years ago, water that will be vapor over the Pacific in a few weeks. And now, at the end of this long, slow journey, we arrive back here, at this room, at this particular evening, at this body, lying still, growing heavier with each slow breath. And in all of that, in the deep time and the immense space, and the extraordinary complexity of the living systems that cover this planet, there is one small but important fact worth sitting with as you fall asleep. You are part of this, not separate from it, not outside it looking in, not a visitor or an observer. The atoms in your body were forged in the cores of stars that exploded billions of years ago. The carbon in your bones and muscles was once carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, fixed into a plant by photosynthesis, eaten by something, cycled through generations of living things before finding its way into you. The water in your blood has been in the ocean and in clouds and in rivers and in the cells of other creatures too numerous to count. You breathe the same air that has been breathed by every human being who ever lived and by every other air-breathing creature. The oxygen you are taking into your lungs right now was released by a tree somewhere on the planet in the last few years, or by phytoplankton in the ocean. In a very real sense, every breath connects you to the great photosynthetic community of the living earth. You feel the same pull of the moon that lifts the tides. You are warmed by the same sun. You are protected by the same magnetic field, the same ozone layer, the same atmospheric blanket that has been shielding life on this planet since before the first fish swam in the shallow Cambrian seas. You are not merely on the earth, you are of it, and tonight the earth is holding you. The bedrock beneath your foundation, the soil beneath that, the layers of crust and mantle and core all the way down to the iron heart of the planet, pressing outward against 4 billion years of gravity. All of it is, in the most literal physical sense, holding you up. The planet spins at roughly 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, and you feel nothing. The planet orbits the sun at 67,000 miles per hour, and you feel nothing. The solar system moves through the Milky Way at about 490,000 miles per hour,
and you feel nothing. You are held in perfect stillness by the very fact of being part of all of this, moving with it, inside it, carried along in the largest, slowest, most patient journey imaginable. It has been a long day, whatever your day held. The decisions and the worries and the small frustrations and the larger concerns, all of them real, all of them yours, but none of them as large tonight as the planet turning slowly in the dark, none of them as permanent as stone, none of them as patient as a bristlecone pine adding its millimeter of wood in the cold mountain wind. You are allowed to set them down now, not to solve them or dismiss them, but simply to set them aside for these hours of rest, knowing they will still be there when you wake, but that you do not need to carry them through your sleep.
The ancient trees are growing their millimeter of new wood. The whales are singing in the dark ocean. The aurora may be dancing at the poles. The soil is alive and working in the dark. The rain is falling somewhere on a mountain and beginning its long journey toward the sea. The stars that lit the sky when the first humans looked up are still there, still burning, their light still traveling. The earth has been keeping life alive for 4 billion years. It will keep you alive tonight. It does not need your help or your attention or your worry. It only asks that you breathe and rest and let yourself be carried. The seasons are turning slowly as they always have. Somewhere in the northern hemisphere, trees are photosynthesizing. Somewhere in the southern hemisphere, it is the other season. The migratory birds are somewhere between where they came from and where they are going. The deep ocean is lit from within. The soil is alive. The aurora, if you could see it tonight, would be moving like a curtain in a slow wind. All of this is happening right now as you lie here. All of this is the ordinary condition of the planet on a quiet night. You are home. You have always been home. You were made from this planet, and you will return to it. And in the meantime, it holds you with a patience and a steadiness that no human arrangement can quite match. Let your eyes close now. Let the breath slow. Let the body grow heavy, the way the body knows how to grow heavy when it finally lets itself. The planet is turning gently in the dark, as it has for 4 billion years, and you are resting on it. You are, in every sense that matters, exactly where you are supposed to be. Sleep well.